I want to tell you about Texas radio and the big beat. It was a warm summer night with our song playing on the radio. Welcome back to our new episode of I Remember Radio. It's our second triple play with KFXM. Today, we have returning Bruce Chandler and introducing Doug Collins and Vic Moreno.
Doug Collins was the morning man, 6 to 10 a.m., and program director of KFXM at the time I was there. Vic Moreno had the lion's share of weekend shifts and fill-ins. Somebody made a lot of money at KFXM. It wasn't us, because I would come in and there would be a stack of production, and I would be working the whole time until I got on the air at 2 o'clock. The owner got his money's worth.
Bruce, you mentioned you did production in the daytime endlessly, blah, blah, blah. I think Doug used to save his production for Saturday mornings at 6 a.m.
Many times.
He'd come in, and I thought, well, he's going to sit down and play the records. No. He'd go to the production room, and I would play bits and pieces of his voice and the records and 7 o'clock, he'd wander back in and maybe go live. But that was Saturday mornings. Confessions.
Hey, I had a lot of production things to do.
Well, I've been playing records for 6 hours. I was tired of it.
I had Harris's, and I had Super Shops, and all those things that just had to be done.
Yeah, I knew Saturday mornings were like that. They were going to be like that every time. I was ready for it. At 5 o'clock, I'd play your songs, a song so you'd wake up to. 5 o'clock world.
You remember calling me in the morning?
I had to call you and remind you.
You had to talk to me until I was awake.
And then when you came in, you were kind of awake, but you got there.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
I don't know if I did mornings most of my career, and no one ever had to call me to wake up to get to work. I actually got that done all by myself, Doug.
You're more professional than I am, Bruce. I wanted to ask you while we were here. After leaving KFXM, you had a great deal of success. But why the name change from Bruce Chandler to Jeff Robbins?
Okay, the name change from Bruce Chandler to Jeff Robbins happened it was right after the KEZY blowout. I was on the air at the time, and I thought, I think I'll go to my inbox in the lobby and see if there's any mail or memos. Well, there was a memo. And I took it back into the studio, and as I'm still on the air, I'm reading this memo, single-spaced, very long memo. And it sounded like the entire staff was fired from KEZY. And later that turned out to be true. So I was out, just like that. And I was looking for work all of a sudden. I mean, this was just like total surprise.
Bruce, you must admit that you got into radio for the stability of the employment, right?
Oh, yeah. I never thought about stability. I just loved radio and said, that's what I want to do. So I heard that John Wickstrom at KWOW needed someone to track the afternoon show. 16 KWOW, it was an oldie station in Pomona. So I went in for an interview. He hired me. I started tracking, but John said, you're going to have to change your name because you're going to pop up somewhere, probably in Los Angeles, and I can't have you as Bruce Chandler at KWOW and in LA. So we need to change your name. So I was caught flat-footed with that, and I didn't know what name I wanted to use. And there were FCC first class and third class, second class licenses on the wall in the production area. So I picked a name I saw on one of the licenses. It was Jeff, and another license had Robbins on it. I thought, okay, I'll be Jeff Robbins. Jeff and Robbins with one B. So I had to change my name for KWOW. And Vic, I knew you years before we met.
The Valley?
No, it was before Valley College. You didn't know that I knew you because I heard you win contests all the time.
Oh, that.
Vic went by his name Ignacio Moreno.
No, Nacho.
Oh, Nacho. Like
Yeah.
the nachos? Was
Was
that a nickname?
Well, if you look at Ignacio and you shorten it, it's Nacho. Nacio. Anyway.
Just about every day back in the early 60s, on our latest winner of a KFXM chicken dinner, Nacho Moreno.
I had a lot of 6 packs of RC Cola and 6 pack of hits that weren't hits, and yada, 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 yada. The guys at the station really must have hated me because I would be doing it every day. That got old.
You might have been the reason, I think, down the road, they said you could only win a contest once every 30 days or something.
Yeah.
You would win. What was your secret?
Fast fingers on the dialer, a rotary dialer.
Yeah.
No touchstone. Yeah, and amazing. I would listen to KFXM since 57, and I would be winning and listening and And who was me? I don't know. I'd be sitting there in 71, 72. It was an amazing turnaround to have listened to KFXM for so long, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there. It's awesome, but turned out well.
Yeah, I had much the same feeling. I remember when my first paycheck working at a professional radio station was at Cayman doing weekend news, and someone that the I Remember radio producers interviewed not long ago, Jack Fleming, who used to
I saw that interview.
Jack Fleming hired me at Cayman. He was the news director at Cayman at the time. I remember auditioning for it live on the air in late 1966. I'm sitting there and Brian Lord is on the air. It was his second time at Cayman. And he was sitting across from me. He was doing afternoons now. He did originally 6 to 9. So I'm sitting there across from Brian Lord, and I'm just about to go on the air to do the news. They're listening to me in the production room, on the speakers in the production room. I'm auditioning live. So the sounder came on, da, 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 that this is Bruce Chrisinger, is my real name. And I was using Chrisinger at the time. This is, it came on. I've got my Clevite brush headphones on, and I'm thinking, OMG, here I am sitting across from Brian Lord on Cayman, the station I idolized along with KFXM. And I'm sitting here auditioning for a newscaster slot. All right, here we go. And then it came, da, 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 da. I said, this is Bruce Chrisinger, Cayman 2020 News at 20 minutes after 5, brought to you by whatever. So anyway, I got through the newscast. Then Jack Fleming, after the newscast, came in, and I'll never forget, he goes, wow, gee, I don't know what to, I don't have any, I really can't tell you how to, you're hired.
Oh, wow.
So I guess I impressed him. And that was the start of my few years at Cayman. And later I would go on to become a weekend DJ. That was exciting. Like when you were talking about being on the listening end of KFXM, and all of a sudden you're you're at the Holiday Inn studios on the air.
Yeah, the station you listened to forever, and you're sitting there in the middle of where it used to come from. It was just awesome.
Where I really wanted to be was KFXM doing afternoon drive. And I remember thinking that in 1967. And I really thought about it. In fact, I would be lying in bed at night, picturing myself at the KFXM microphone doing afternoon drive at KFXM. Well, in October of 1971, I started on afternoon drive at KFXM. So I think there's really something about thinking of something in your head and visualizing. And if you visualize hard enough, it'll happen, as maybe what happened to you, Vic.
It was just the fun of listening to the station, being out there. Then all of a sudden you're sitting in that chair and you think, whoa, this ain't real. You came in October, early October. I got there like October 25th.
Oh, we got there the same
We did.
month.
Shortly after you got on, I got on. And you were there till about 74?
Early 74.
Yeah, winter 74. I remember when you left. What was your last record?
You know why I don't know what my last record was? Because I was pulled off the day that was supposed to be my last show. Al Anthony pulled me off the air, said, you're not going on. I didn't even get to say goodbye. His reason, that was a good reason. He said, I had a good following, and he didn't want me to telegraph to people that I was leaving because they might leave with me.
Okay. Why do I have this idea that your last record there was We May Never Pass This Way Again?
That was at KIQQ, K100.
Was it?
Yeah.
I thought I was in the studio when you were there at the time you were leaving, and your last record was. I thought it was that somewhere. I dreamt it. I saw it.
I do remember I played that at K100 as or KIQQ as my last.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Doug, did we lose you? Where are you?
Hey.
I just wondered if you were talking about contests and professional contest players. Do you remember the name Florine Dequette?
Oh, yes.
Yes, and yes again.
I sent a written eulogy for her funeral services, and it read, in short, I've never met Florine Dequette, but I've talked to her 1,000 times on the telephone. She was Mike, you would have in radio contest pros, people that just wanted to play the contest. They really didn't care that much about what the prizes were. But Florine was a contest pro. And she'd sit there, Dick, as you said, she was fast on the dial. We'd take a certain numbered caller, and she would win again and again and again. And we finally put in a rule that said you've got to be, 2 days, 3 days, something like that, between your wins, just to stop her and the other pros.
Now, Doug, how did you get to KFXM, and where were you? I never asked you this. Where were you before KFXM?
At a whole string of radio stations, everywhere from San Bernardino to Orange County to 2 times in Palm Springs. You mentioned KCKC. That was probably the first radio job that I got fired from, and the strangest radio job. Remember Frank Gilmore?
The name sounds familiar.
He was a salesman and a jock. I was going to Valley, and Joe and Agnes McGilvra owned KCKC. And Frank Gilmore was their 10-2 man. But he had a production deal with the then owners of KFMW in Riverside. So he had to take Wednesdays off. So I was the midday man on MOR KCKC on Wednesdays only for a long time. When Harry Trenner, Doug Trenner's father, bought KCKC, and they were bringing in their country western crew. Their program director and midday man came to me and said, I'm sorry, but we really don't need a 1 day a week midday man. And that was Bob Mitchell.
Oh, yeah, I remember
and
that.
Over the years, many times, every time I saw Bob or talked to him on the phone, I'd remind him, you fired me. You fired me.
Yeah, so you were actually a weekend DJ on Wednesdays.
That was about it. And I also did weekends on KDUO when I was at Valley, where you'd go into KDUO and put on the lowest voice you could possibly find. You guys never worked KDUO, did you?
No, never.
No.
I worked KDUO and then went to Palm Springs and Orange County and back to Palm Springs. I was afternoon drive on KDES. Remember, Bruce, when we were getting in the teens and low 20s as far as ratings in the San Bernardino Riverside, Ontario market?
Oh, yeah.
KDES, if you didn't get into the 40s or 50 percentile range, you weren't doing it.
Wow.
We absolutely owned that town.
Did you work with Marshall Phillips at KDES?
Of course. Marshall and I go way back. When I went to Cayman, I hired him to do news and also to cover me with a first-class license, because all you guys had first-class radio licenses, but I did not.
Marshall Phillips and I were 1965 graduates of Montana High School. I saw him again. It was great to see Marshall again. The Faux High reunion, 50th year reunion, Marshall and I caught up, and it was just like it could have been yesterday. So, Vic, after KFXM,
yes,
how many years were you there? Did I leave? I left before you, right?
Yes, you did.
So you were there for how many more years? Because I left in early 1974.
I was there about a little over a year after that. I was playing the records one night, Sunday night, whatever it was, and Al Anthony walks in. Not a surprise to me. And he walks in and he says, "Vic, we got to talk. I'm playing records." And he says, "I got to let you go." And I'm playing records. Yeah. But I said, what's wrong? He says, "Well, you've been letting come in and use the production room, and we've told you endlessly, no. Anyway, that was the surprise he pulled that night. And he had Bobby West ready to go. Bobby was in the hallway. Anyway, that was my let go from Armando.
I knew you probably didn't leave on your own. They would have had to drag you kicking and screaming out of there.
No, it was time. And then I realized this is not for me. I've done my fantasy of listening to KFXM and being there. And I've done my fantasy. Radio's not for me. It's for the other guys that really have a head into it. And my time had come. And that was it. I went to CBS in LA. Was there 32 years, retired 8 years ago.
See, you went to CBS doing what?
I was engineer technician for 32 years, but it was great because technology kept changing, and it was like a new job every 10 years. You look back and you think, oh, it's all changed again and again. It was like moving on to a new job. Anyway, loved it there. 32 years, an incredible place, and incredible people, and I walked away nicely and on my own terms this time.
Dick, you were always the most valuable go-to guy. You were a weekender, you were fill-in, and whenever there was an emergency, there you were. You helped us out so many times.
Well, it was a privilege to be there, and privilege to be there with you guys and others. That's all it was.
Doug, I think Tom Magnuson is a great radio name. How did you end up with Doug Collins? When
I was at Valley with Ed Rother. You guys go to Valley?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Ed Rother?
Absolutely.
Well, I was doing shows on their little KVCR FM,
Was it the bandstand?
Yeah, you bet. Friday bandstand.
Ah, I think I did Thursdays. I'm not sure.
1 hour.
1
Right.
hour.
1 hour.
And
Is all you got.
That my name wasn't what they called euphonic. And I
Oh.
can't find the word in the dictionary, but it's probably there. It wasn't a name that you could easily pronounce. It wasn't a name that you could easily remember. So I sat around with some friends one night and said, let's come up with a name. And at that time in radio, first names with one syllable and last names with two syllables were very popular. So we came up with Doug Collins, and it stuck for 30 years.
I remember on my bandstand show, a friend of mine, Jim DeYoung, had his hour, and I came in once, and I was just being silly, and I put a corn nut on Jim DeYoung's turntable as he was playing a song. I didn't know it would knock off the tone arm. I don't know why I even put a corn nut on his turntable. But anyway, it knocked the arm off. And Jim is angry about that, even 50 years later. Anybody see Jim DeYoung, ask him about the corn nut that I put on his turntable. Actually, don't, because I was at a party once and I had somebody ask him about the corn nut, and we were looking all around for him at the party. And we brought it up again, and he got angry all over again. Don't mention the corn nut to Jim.
Almost everybody we've talked to has a story about the Swing Auditorium, and we have so many of them now. I think we're going to do an episode about Swing Auditorium stories and rock bands. The three of you all have one?
I do. It's not really a story. It's just a couple of times. I remember going to an Iron Butterfly concert at Swing Auditorium. It was packed and loud. Doug, didn't Elvis perform at the Swing Auditorium?
Elvis, the Stones, so many big acts.
Yeah, because when we were at KFXM, Chris Roberts got Elaine, my wife at the time, and still, and I seats at Elvis's concert. Really good seats. I think we're only like about 5 or 6 rows from the stage. And I remember when Elvis came on stage, he was so famous, 1972, so famous, probably one of the more famous personalities, music singers, music actors in the world, that I actually, when I saw him, I did catch myself kind of like, whoa, there he is. You know how you would swoon, but I didn't swoon in a sexual way. It was like, whoa, it was like starstruck. It was incredible seeing Elvis walk on stage with his white, he had the white jumpsuit. They gave a great show. Later, we found out that his people had rented the entire upper floor of the Hilton in San Bernardino.
Hey, Bruce, wasn't this the time of Burning Love?
Burning Love, yes, exactly.
October 72, around there.
Yeah, I think it might have been summer of 72, maybe late
summer. It was around the time of Burning Love, because I remember I got a ticket too. I wasn't in the front seats, like near there where you were, but I went.
Oh, you were there?
Yeah, you couldn't see me. I was way back there.
That's why I couldn't see you, because you were way back there.
No, I waved at you, but you didn't see me. No,
that's because
you were looking forward.
Because I couldn't see you.
That's right.
I certainly would have waved back.
Too late.
And let me think. There was another time when we were at KFXM. There was a rock and roll show that came through, and Dick Clark. Would you remember this, Doug? Dick Clark was part of it.
I remember going over to Riverside. Dick Clark owned Capro in Riverside.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I remember going over to do some sort of a promotion in Riverside that K-Pro was supposed to be the host radio station, but obviously the KFXM jocks were a lot more well-known, and I thought Clark was just a heck of a nice guy, just a fine gentleman.
Yeah, Dick Clark, it was just amazing how much he was a multitasker, how much he could do at the same time. He had his fingers in everything. KFXM, unfortunately, met a sad ending when they changed format. What did they change to, Doug? And what year? Do you remember?
News Talk.
News Talk, at which they still are.
And did you go to the party that Howard's wife,
Ruth.
Ruth threw a party for the jocks and the former jocks there in the banquet room at the Holiday Inn when she was selling the station. And it had tried talk, and let's face it, AM rock and roll radio had a long and painful death. We kind of presided over it.
There's so much more to choose from now that's why DJs back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, we were so much more high profile because there wasn't really much to choose from. It was us and no satellite radio, no Spotify, no streaming, nothing. But now everything has been divided and then divided up again and divided up again. And now you can go anywhere. I literally cannot name one DJ on any music station in Los Angeles. Can you? Anybody? Vic?
No.
Name one.
I listen to talk radio basically. If I listen at all. Music, not really. No. And you're speaking of sources. I had 8,500 45s at one time some years ago when I sold my house, moved to somewhere else. I couldn't take them with me. I basically gave them away, 8,500 of them. They were like a third hand to me. And, I don't miss them. I can go to YouTube, ... There it is.
Doug, have you ever been to Amoeba Records in Hollywood?
Never have.
Wow.
You've never been to Amoeba?
Nope.
That's amazing.
It's gone.
Well, what they're going to do, it's still there, but it's going to be torn down, and they're building a high-rise on that corner. And I remember when I first went to K100, we were on the western corner, 6430 Sunset, and I remember the first time I saw the view from the 11th floor. It was absolutely amazing. You could look at the Cinerama Dome. You're on the air, and there's a picture window in front of you. You could see the Cinerama Dome. You could see down Sunset Boulevard going east. And way in the distance at night, you could see the lights of Dodger Stadium. It was absolutely beautiful. And the first thing I thought of when they said that the Amoeba Records was shutting down and they were going to build a high rise, there goes that view from the 11th floor on Sunset Boulevard.
Didn't Tullis have offices there way back when?
Yes.
I thought so.
I think he had an ad agency. Doug, maybe you know more about this.
He was in the Sunset Tower.
Okay, that's where Kiss FM used to be, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, he had the ad agency long before there was a Kiss FM.
Right. Wasn't Cuddy Sark one of Howard Tullis's clients?
Cuddy Sark was one of his biggest clients. Every 2 years, he got a Cuddy Sark Cadillac that was painted in, you've seen a bottle of Cuddy Sark, right? The mustard yellow and very dull olive drab green on the label. Those were the colors of the Cadillac that they assigned to him for 2 years at a time.
Oh.
And he kept the account because everywhere else in the United States, the ad agency, his account was for the billboards, not for broadcast. But Howard would get in onto a plane, rent a car, and do what they'd call run the billboards, which means go out and say, okay, you say that you are posting these billboards at these 15 locations in Portland or 12 locations in Tucson. He was one of the few advertising agents that would actually get in a car and go out and look at them and verify that they really were posted.
Well, KFXM had such a great signal that Howard could listen to it, monitor the station from his offices in Hollywood. So you never knew when Howard was listening. We would always try.
Let me share with you my very favorite, and there are so many good Howard Cutler stories, but you remember the red phone in the control room?
Oh, yes, the red phone,
Well, Howard called me one day when he was in his car. He had a car phone, and he was on his way to LAX. And we talked about a problem at the radio station for about 45 minutes. Now, keep in mind, I'm on the air. So it's Howard, hold on a second. Record ends, right? Talk while the commercials play. Got to do the, I'm going back and forth in my conversation with him and doing an on-air radio show. And we talked for about 45 minutes. Would you like to know the subject of the conversation?
Oh, tell us.
How can we keep the disc jockeys from being distracted from what they're doing on the air while they're talking on the telephone?
Love it.
Howard was more than a showman. If you said balloon to Howard Tullis, he would think this big gray thing that said Goodyear on the side, right? That's the kind of a guy he was. The last time I saw Howard and Ruth, Catherine and I had our place down in South Rosarito, and we're at the Shell Bar at the Rosarito Beach Hotel. And I look out to the pool, and here is Howard and Ruth, Howard in his usual $75 shiny suit.
It was blue.
This is Baja, right? He's by the pool in a suit. There's Ruth. I go out and I page phone call for Howard Tullis. Howard Tullis phone call. Comes in. I buy him and Ruth a couple of drinks. And within 10 minutes, he wants to talk about how the programming of KFXM was going. He really knew how to relax.
He never left it at the office.
No. They were trying to find Baja Mar, which was a golf resort about 30 miles to the south, just before Ensenada. And they were thinking about buying a place there. That was the last time I saw Howard Tullis.
Al Anthony, he was the consultant of all of the Tullis and Hearn stations at one time, wasn't he? Didn't he have a lot to do with them?
They had Kathy in Bakersfield, KDEO in San Diego, KFXM KDUO, and I think they had one other radio station for a very short time.
So KFXM eventually went on to beat KMN a lot. I was at KMN in late 66, early 67 as a weekend news guy, and KFXM, I think by that time, had beaten us. Gary Marshall was doing the morning show. He replaced Don Elliott. And then there were DJs named Charlie Walters, Dick Lyons.
Yeah, Dick Lyons.
And then a great longtime friend of mine, Johnny Helm, got hired to do All Nice at KFXM. And then he crossed over to KMN. It was quite a battle. In fact, I remember at KMN, Dave McCormick, the program director that replaced maybe Brian Lord was the program director in 66. Dave McCormick came in 67. He put a sign up at the station at KMN. It said, "It's never 59 degrees." So if we were given a weather forecast,
Yeah.
and if it was 59 degrees,
Yes.
we had to say it was either 58, because 59 was the frequency of KFXM. So we could never mention the number 59 on the air for some reason. And I remember we were doing some kind of a on-camera reunion that was broadcast, and I said this at the time, and it's true. It just seemed a little weird to me, like like if listeners heard you say it was 59 degrees, they'd go, 59. I think I'll listen to KFXM.
Nostalgical.
Yeah, well, I don't know. But anyway.
Paranoia.
Well, and when I went from KFXM, or from KMN to KFXM, at the time, the program director of KMN had all these different clocks that we had to, the format that we'd have to follow. And I remember he'd come in and he'd go, all right, we have a new clock.
Yeah.
And we're going to play an A rotation here, a B here, and then the third one is going to be a C. That'll screw them up. They'll just wonder, what are they doing? Then a D, and then we had all these things that we had to follow. And I thought, what are they doing over at KFXM? Because we're getting beaten all the time. The pulse ratings would really, they just clean our clocks. Little pun there. So when I went over to KFXM, Doug told me what the format was, how they picked their music. And what was that format, Doug?
It was very, very simple. You start the hour with an up-tempo top 10. You follow it with a hit from the list, then an oldie. Repeat all the way through the hour until you get to the top of the next hour and do the same thing again. We weren't brilliant programmers. KFXM had the same basic format for the 6.5 years that I was there. K-Man, on the other hand, during that same time, went through, 8, 10 program directors, each of which veered the programming in a slightly or sometimes significant direction. Scooter Seagraves made it practically an AOR station.
Right.
There was one guy that wanted the jocks to just talk. I can't remember his name, but he didn't last longer than the others. And we just kept playing the thing. Now, when you called me, I was on the air, and you said that you wanted to come to KFXM. I remember the quote that you came up with. Now, we've got a music director that's telling us exactly the songs we're going to play, in what order we're going to play them. You guys are ripping records off the wall and beating our ass.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Exactly.
Remember that?
Yeah. And what we had a grease pencil.
You greased
we were on the air.
The ones until you went through a whole rotation on the hit list. And your oldies, the ones you pulled, you'd put up in the rack so they wouldn't be played for 24 hours.
And we got to play any oldie that was available, that we saw fit.
The disc jockey made the mood, made the flow, right?
Exactly.
You got a feeling for it.
So yeah, we would, as you said, we'd play one song that was on the top 15 of the top 30.
Up tempo to start the hour.
Right. And then the bottom 15 would be the next song.
Yeah.
And then the third song would be an oldie. Rotate and repeat. That was it.
That was it. Real simple. You had a certain number of promos that you would do during the hour. You knew when the newscast was going to be. It really didn't change that much in the 6.5 years that I was there, and it was successful. We weren't programming geniuses. That format was in place when I went to work there, and it was only starting to be taken apart when I left, when they hired Jeff Salgo.
After Chris Roberts left, they hired a guy named Gary Roberts.
Oh, yeah.
And
whoa,
not one of my favorites.
And I believe, Doug, Didn't you have a little altercation with Gary
It was not
Roberts?
a little altercation. We got into a fight while I was on the air, and I did not miss a single break, nor was there any dead air.
But didn't you break your arm?
No, I got a broken rib. He felt that coming in while I was on the air and talking about the pay structure that he had agreed to when he came to work there, he felt that that was the proper time to discuss it. And I allowed as how perhaps when I wasn't on the air and he wasn't on the air would be a more appropriate time. And there seemed to be a little disagreement about that. His biggest complaint was the pay structure, and it was legal. I never liked it, and none of the jocks liked it, and I was on the same pay structure. You were paid for a 46-hour week, 40 hours of straight time, and 6 hours at time and a half, right?
Yeah, I
And
remember that.
he had taken a couple of days off during the week. And for taking 2 days off, well, you don't have 6 hours of overtime. So your next paycheck is going to be pretty light. And he came in holding the paycheck and he was mad. And my response was, Gary, I don't like it any more than anybody else. But you agreed to it when you came to work here. This is not a mystery. If you didn't like it, you should have said something then. You shouldn't be saying it now while I'm on the air playing records.
Well, he didn't last very long, as
No.
I remember. Do you know where he went?
Well, he had a trade. He was either a carpenter or he had some sort of a building trade to fall back on.
He got out of the business.
So then he came when Bill Wade was made program director of K-Man, which lasted for about, 180 days. Wade hired him. And that lasted, 30, 60, 90 days.
And you went from KFXM to K-Man. We haven't mentioned that.
Well, you all know Jim Markham.
Jim Markham, who was one of the original K-Man weekenders and the chief engineer at the time, back in 1962.
Absolute top grade radio professional.
Gentleman Jim Markham.
Gentleman Jim Markham. He knew programming. He knew sales. He knew engineering. He knew operations. He was just an all-in-all good radio man. He hired me to go to K-Man.
Did you ever think you'd end up at K-Man?
No, not really. But by that point, I was more concerned with my side deals and my business. Radio had kind of lost its mystique by that point. I was kind of phoning it in. What year was it? Mid-70s, mid-late 70s.
Just one thing. You keep talking about KFXM guys going to Cayman. I think, Bruce, you're the only one that came this way.
Yes, you are correct. I went the other way, and it was written up in the San Bernardino Sun-Telegram that Bruce Chandler is now afternoons at KFXM from Cayman, the first DJ to ever go from Cayman to KFXM, because all of the others went the other way. And that's true, too, because Lyle Kilgore went to Cayman back in 64, I think. He was but he wasn't a DJ he was a DJ at KFXM, but it was mostly news. And then went to Cayman as a news director. Brad Edwards went to Cayman from KFXM. Bob Griffin went to Cayman from KFXM.
And after me, Jim Zippo, Mike Matthews.
Jim Zippo's in Dallas at KLUV. Still, great radio guy. I remember years ago I was in Las Vegas, and he was doing the morning show at a station in Vegas, and he just sounded great. He's got a great, fast, brilliant mind.
and he does a whole morning production.
Yeah, humor, very humorous guy. A lot of
And
drop
a lot of preparation.
You know, what we haven't talked about is some of the DJs at KFXM that ended up in LA back early in the early days of rock and roll. Roger Christian ended up at KFWB
KBLA,
and okay, but he was at KFWB too, and KHJ, but he could never show up to work on time, is from what I hear. And he didn't last too long. But he was at KFXM. Now, Vic, you fill in the blanks for me, because I started listening to KFXM regularly in late 1960 when I got a transistor radio for Christmas. Who was on before there? You started listening to KFXM when? What year?
57, but I don't recall names of the jocks that were on there. It was the music and the six-pack of hits that got my attention. That's all. The jocks, I don't recall the guys till about 61, 2, somewhere in there. I didn't pay attention to that part of it.
You didn't pay attention to the DJs.
No, it was just the aura of the station that I love, and the music.
Thanks, Vic.
Anyway, yeah, eventually, you listen long enough and you know who's who, who's not who. But yeah, I didn't pay attention to the jocks.
I can still remember the DJ lineup at KFXM when I first started listening in late 1960. Ron Garner did the Rise and Shine show, 6 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
The midday guy was Jack Sands. And that show, each show had a name.
Yeah.
Jack Sands did the Coffee Club. And then Bill Tanner did the Club 590. And then Gary Price did 6 to Midnight, the Platter Party. And George Babcock did Night Watch from midnight to 6. Those shifts were, that 6 to midnight shift must have been, queuing up all those records, playing the commercials on, I think this might have been before cartridges. They had to have been on either records or reel to reel. 6 hours of that, and each song was about 2.5 minutes long on average. Mm-hmm. 6 hours, 5 nights a week, doing the 6 to midnight or midnight to 6. That must have been it. That took a lot of either love for radio, fortitude, concentration. And I remember, did you ever do this, Vic or Doug, when you're not thinking and you're so busy on the air? Did you ever take the tone arm off the record while it was playing on the air and then go, oops, putting it back? I've done that a few times. Or when the record skips, you'd panic, and then you'd have to pot it down. This is back when we had knobs instead of sliding controls.
Yeah.
You pot it down and put the tone arm back on the record and then start it and turn it back up again. There was a lot that could go wrong back in the early 60s in Top 40 Rock.
Yeah, it's too mechanical. Now it's just electronics and you push buttons and that's it. Everything is available to you at your fingertips.
Well, when my last radio job was caterer in Los Angeles, and at the time, it got so easy. Everything was on a screen, and you could call it up. There'd be you'd work with 2 screens. You would highlight on the left screen what you wanted to carry over onto the virtual cart machines, and you load them on with a mouse. We used a marble mouse. It was so easy. Load them on and fire them off on the board. And I remember Johnny Helm, when he was on the air, he would get so far behind. All the records would be stacked up. The commercials would be stacked up in no particular order. It would be a mess by the time he got off the air. And he had to spend like 10 minutes getting everything back to where it belonged for the next guy. So radio got to be so easy that you would just load and fire. And then when your song is over or your commercial is over, it just disappeared. Boom, you clear it, gone. That made it really, you could concentrate on what you were going to do on the air instead of, oh, I've got a stack of records I got to put away, and I've got all these cartridges that I have to put back in, what number it goes on in the commercial rack. It was a lot of work back then in the early 60s, but it was fun. But remember, you'd get cue burns on some of the records.
You mean the front?
Queuing them up so much, it would go.
That's why we change them every week.
Right.
You got a whole new set of 45s, the top 40, whatever, a new set. And during the week, if they were that bad, they were replaced immediately. But every week, got new records.
And Doug, the surveys that we did, the Tiger 30, wasn't it fun to, like, I remember, here's another thing where I pictured, when I first started listening to KFXM, I fell in love with the surveys, and you could see a song would be number 38 and debut on the top 40. And then you'd wonder, wow, I wonder if this is going to be a hit. And then you'd listen to the survey being counted down. And then the next week it showed up at number 24. And you go, whoa, 38 to 24. Man, that was really quite a jump.
Who made that up?
Yeah. And I would sit down and type out a survey.
Yes.
This is how into it I would just type out my own survey and figure it out. And I had a typewriter in the paper and I type it out. Little did I know that 10 years later, I would be making up all those numbers on the actual KFXM Tiger 30. You could only guess. We really didn't have any figures that we went by. And then you'd look at Billboard and Cashbox and think, okay, well, this song deserves to go from number 10 to number 5. And that's when I realized that. And it all was very methodical because you would have to go through it and account for the songs that if 5 songs dropped off, you'd have to put 5 new songs on the top 40 or top 30. And you couldn't make a song drop from number 2 to totally off the top 30. You would have to methodically drop it slowly off, or I would usually figure as a rule of thumb, if its number drops to number 20, you could probably bounce it the next week. So it was very mathematically involved. So you couldn't, I remember when I was listening to KFXM, the Four Seasons, Big Girls Don't Cry, you might remember this, Vic.
62.
Yes, 1962. It went from wax to watch to number 1 in 1 week. I remember that night I was so excited that this is the first time in history a song went from nowhere on the charts to number 1. And the only other song that went from that far down to number 1 was Runaway by Del Shannon. Went from number 24. Why I remember this, I have no idea. To number 1 and stayed at number 1 for 5 weeks in 1961. So the whole KFWB Top 40 Survey, KFXM Fabulous 59. K-Men is 10. K-Men only had to worry about 10 songs. They had the K-Men is 10. So that was a lot easier to figure out. And then everything else was listed according to the date first heard on K-Men. Remember that, Vic?
Right.
These songs are listed according to the date they were first heard on K-Men.
The debut.
They debuted. So that made it a lot easier to do it. But figuring out the top 30 and the top 40 every week as music director, boy, you'd have to sit down and account for every song that appeared and every song that took. And I would always be really careful not to have a song go from number 8 to off the survey, because that just looks bad. It's not a good look.
But Bruce, as a listener, you believed in the illusion. In the magic of what it looked like, and you believed it, and that was enough for you. Me too.
Well, imagine when I found out that the Billboard Hot 100 was figured out in much the same way. It just really, just kind of, it shattered a part of what I grew up with.
But believing in it was the fun part.
You know what I could never understand is KFXM, KDUO. Why didn't someone move KFXM to KDUO's signal?
That's what Al and I had talked about many times, right? Just get John to get in touch with, John Hearn had been an FCC attorney.
Co-owner of KFXM. Tullis and Hearn.
Yeah, Tullis and Hearn, John Hearn. Yeah. John had been an FCC attorney. And we said many times, what we're going to do is we're going to have him simultaneously apply for KDUO FM to become KFXM FM and vice versa. And, we're going to have to do a little work. We're going to have to come up with some stereo music. Everything we've got is mono, but it can be done, and it would be a good thing to do. But it never happened.
That would have been perfect, because the signal was incredible. It could have, the exact format could have moved over to KDUO, and I would have, like, maybe a month and a half in advance, run promos that say, like, on January 1st, 1980, KFXM moves to 97.5. But KDUO, you can hear your beautiful music on 590, all starting January 1st of 1980.
It would have been absolutely fantastic, and probably would have saved KFXM as a top 40 or a rock radio station.
Right.
But didn't happen.
Oh.
So KFXM and K-Men, as we knew it, they're both gone now as far as being big parts of people's lives. But we were there.
Yeah.
Inland Empire.
We knew it when they were fun. They're not fun.
The Inland Empire was one of the greatest sites of a top 40 radio battle between K-Men and KFXM between 1962 and into the mid 70s. That was a long time.
Yeah.
And it was quite a market to be listening in, because it was exciting radio.
It was a warm